Hi, I'm Allie Janes, filling in for Jamie Poisson.
Dime, esto es lo que tú querías. Yo soy fino, esto es trap de galería.
Reggaeton artist Bad Bunny is, by all measures, a global superstar. He's the second most streamed artist on Spotify. He's the first Latin artist to have 100 entries on the Billboard Hot 100 chart. And he's managed to do it all while still remaining true to his Puerto Rican roots and being one of the most politically outspoken artists of his stature. But no project has been more ambitious in both those goals than his most recent album, Debí tirar más fotos, or I Should Have Taken More Photos. It's a love letter to Puerto Rico, a celebration of its heritage, and a plea from a generation of Puerto Ricans to save the island from cultural erosion and gentrification.
I'm a huge Bad Bunny fan. I've seen Benito multiple times in concerts across the U.S., in Puerto Rico. And so I was actually on vacation with my family in Portugal when I was added via Instagram by 3 people that I didn't know. Back then,
This is Dorel Melendez Badillo. He's an assistant professor of history at the University of Wisconsin-Madison and the author of Puerto Rico, A National History. He was asked by Bad Bunny's team to write a series of historical texts to go with the YouTube visualizers for each of the songs on the album.
Part of what Benito wanted was to use his platform not for the students at the University of Puerto Rico, but he wanted to have this history accessible for people in the projects and in working class neighborhoods, en los caseríos y las barriadas. But Benito was very adamant. At first they asked me if I could write sort of the unknown history of Puerto Rico. He said that he wanted to include the history of surveillance and repression throughout the 20th century, the history of colonial governors, the history of reggaeton, and how it connected to bomba and plena and other Afro-Caribbean rhythms.
Dorel was asked to write a series of excerpts for Bad Bunny's current residency in San Juan, Puerto Rico. It's called No Me Quiero Ir de Aquí, or I Don't Want to Leave Here. A series of 30 concerts, all out of the Coliseo de Puerto Rico, which started in mid-July and run until mid-September. The first chunk of shows were reserved for residents of the island. Starting this past week, they're open to people from everywhere. And they're serving as an opportunity for visitors to see Puerto Rico for the first time, through the eyes of one of its biggest cultural exports. For members of the Puerto Rican diaspora, it's also an opportunity to come home and revel in the moment, after many have had to leave for reasons beyond their control, like Dorel.
I was actually born in a military base in Fort Benning, Georgia, but I was brought back to Puerto Rico by my parents 2 weeks after I was born. They were both military working class folks that joined the military to escape their working class realities in Puerto Rico. And so I always say that my life has been crossed by empire since I was born. But I was raised in Puerto Rico by my grandparents from week 2 all the way to graduate school. And then I left Puerto Rico in 2013 to pursue my PhD. I thought that I was going to go back and serve my country. But that's the moment when the crises exacerbated. So I feel that I'm part of that generation that Benito talks about in Debí tirar más fotos, of those Puerto Ricans that left but didn't want to leave, right? And that the conditions pushed us out. So all that to say that I am part of that generation of Puerto Ricans that left, hoping to return.
So we thought we'd take a look at Bad Bunny's residency and its intent to bring attention to the political and structural forces that have ravaged the territory over more than a century, and how Bad Bunny's art and activism is part of a generation of Puerto Ricans hungry for change. To unpack all of that, I'm talking to Petra Rivera Rideau. She's an associate professor of American Studies at Wellesley College and the author of Remixing Reggaeton, The Cultural Politics of Race in Puerto Rico. Hi, Petra. Thanks so much for being here.
Oh, thanks for having me.
So, just to start off, I want to talk about this latest album, Debí tirar más fotos. For a lot of people, this project really resonates on a deeply personal level. And can you talk to me a bit about how it does that for you and for your family?
Yeah. Well, I grew up in the United States, uh, but I am Puerto Rican. My grandfather migrated to the US in the 1940s as part of the Operation Bootstrap, which brought Puerto Rican laborers to the United States to work in agriculture and manufacturing. And then eventually my father and grandmother joined him. So I grew up in a family that was very proud of being Puerto Rican and with a father who really taught us a lot about Puerto Rican culture and Puerto Rican music. And so, one of the things that I think is very cool about this record in particular is the way, and it's been talked about so much, but the way that Bad Bunny blends traditional Puerto Rican sounds with urban music, la música urbana or reggaeton. I have seen many interviews with him where he talks about that as, one hope being a conversation starter across generations. And that is one thing I really see in my family. Pitorro de Coco, which is my favorite song on the album, came out in December.
Ojalá no conozca otra como tú. Tú eres mala, te fuiste como la luz.
And my dad was visiting. He's in his late 70s, and I have elementary school age kids who love Bad Bunny. And that song, which uses a melody that from very traditional Puerto Rican Christmas music, enabled my father to start a conversation with them or to get my younger children to pay attention to this more traditional sound that they kind of think of as old fashioned and uncool. And also just the general theme of the album around longing. So even though I was born in the United States and raised in the United States, my grandparents, most of their siblings remained in Puerto Rico. And so we would go there often. There was always this like complex feeling of belonging there, but there was an idea of being home. And so I think that kind of diasporic experience, that diasporic longing is captured really well in the album. And I think a lot of us relate to it, even if we're multiple generations removed.
The song Debí tirar más fotos, I should have taken more photos.
Debí tirar más fotos de cuando te tuve. Debí darte más besos y abrazos las veces que pude.
Just when you're talking about that sense of longing, what is kind of behind that sense of loss for people who have had to leave or who are seeing it change before their eyes now? Like, why have people had to leave while others who are still there feel like they're losing their home?
So, Puerto Rico, some have called it the world's oldest colony. Has been a colony of the United States since 1898. And prior to that, it was colonized by the Spanish.
Hmm.
And as a colony, like other colonies in the world, the extraction of resources is important. And labor has always been one of those resources. So, in the earlier parts of the 20th century, we see kind of state sponsored migration to different places, like my grandfather. He was recruited by S.G. Friedman, who was a recruiter at a company that worked with the government to recruit Puerto Ricans to work in manufacturing. That's kind of one chapter of Puerto Rican history that like continues today. We don't necessarily have state sponsored recruitment, but because of the legacies of colonialism um, and the ongoing kind of Puerto Rican debt crisis, um, life in Puerto Rico can be very difficult. We are in the midst of this unprecedented debt crisis that has emerged out of this, 100 plus years of US colonialism in Puerto Rico, but really came to a head in 2015. Puerto Rico has experienced severe austerity measures and life has been difficult, the cutting of social services, the reduction of minimum wage and things like that. But after 2015, things became kind of more dire. One of the things about Puerto Rico being a colony is they couldn't access bankruptcy. So the Obama administration signed legislation called Promesa that would allow Puerto Rico to restructure its debt, but still prioritizing paying back bondholders over social services. So public schools are closing, the university has been cut, hospitals are closing, etc. Um, and then there's just kind of like the everyday life on the island. So we've had natural disasters like Hurricane Maria in 2017, which decimated Puerto Rico. Quickly thereafter, there were earthquakes in the southwestern part of Puerto Rico that caused quite a bit of damage. So there's these environmental impacts. And then there's just these kind of policies left over from colonialism. For example, the Jones Act, which requires anything imported to come on a U.S. ship with a U.S. crew from a U.S. port, which means that your everyday goods are very high in cost, right?
Because just to interrupt for a second, like that could mean theoretically that you've got like, bananas from the Dominican next door would have to go to Miami and then go back to Puerto Rico.
Yeah,
like go to Puerto Rico. Yeah.
Right. So there's all of these things that make life there difficult, combined with this debt crisis, which one of the ways the government sought to infuse capital into the economy was to incentivize wealthy people, generally Americans, to resettle on the island through these various types of legislation that exempt them from capital gains tax and gives them a lower income tax rate. And so we are also in the midst of a major wave of gentrification, and a lot of people are getting displaced. And so all of those things together, I think, create this perfect storm that kind of pushes people out as they seek a more like livable place. I think, that is for me the primary theme that's thread throughout the entire album. In most explicitly in songs like Lo que pasó a Hawaii.
Quieren quitarme el río y también la playa. Quieren el barrio mío y que abuelita se vaya. No suelten la bandera ni olviden.
But also in party songs too, La Mudanza is like a really fun, fast-paced song, but it has some like pretty heavy-duty lyrics about the need to, maintain Puerto Rican culture, maintain Puerto Rican life, and fight for Puerto Rico.
So very much on that same theme is this residency. No me quiero ir de aquí, it's called. I don't want to leave here. The July shows were just for residents of the island only. You had to buy tickets in person on the territory before it was opened up to general sale to outside visitors. There are these tickets now that are for everyone, but there's a lot to unpack here. But first, what do you think is the significance of making those tickets only available to local residents first, especially given this theme?
I think opening it up to Puerto Rican residents is critical. It shows his ongoing commitment, I think, to Puerto Rico and Puerto Ricans, which is something he's had for his entire career.
It's like a wave. It's different. We haven't had anything like this before.
He's gone global, and this last album is a love poem to Puerto Rico and our history, our culture, and who we really are.
It feels like you can get closer to home, even if we're in the States.
It's one of those things that you feel like you never left.
The tour is bringing in visitors now from off the island. During the low season, it's estimated to make around $200 million in tourist dollars for the island. And I know that outside San Juan, a lot of other communities are seeing a real opportunity here. I talked yesterday to Miguel Arturo Garcia Gonzalez, who's the tourism director for Bad Bunny's hometown, Vega Baja. And he's actually designed these tours there. They're almost like a Bad Bunny pilgrimage. Like you visit the church where he was an altar boy, you go to his school, you even go to the specific cash register at the supermarket that he was working at when he hit it big in 2016. And I mean, can you speak a bit to how important this residency is, not just for San Juan, but for other communities throughout the island?
Yeah. Well, I think like a lot of other Caribbean places, Puerto Rico is a tourist economy. And so bringing people to the island and the kind of economic impact that will make is really significant, particularly in August and September, which is, of course, hurricane season and a time when many people are not traveling there. Um, it's a period of time that I generally do not go there, but I am going there because I want to see Bad Bunny. Puerto Rico is a small island. It's 35 by 100 miles. And so but San Juan and the metro area is sort of the center of things. And I think the ability to do something like what you're describing in Vega Baja kind of helps people get out of this kind of touristy bubble in San Juan and explore other parts of the island.
There is, though, like at some level, kind of tension here too, though, right? Like in the sense that people have kind of pointed out this contradiction that you're attracting tens of thousands of people to Puerto Rico at a time when tourism is contributing to gentrification, contributing to rising cost of living. I mean, do you think that he's doing enough to address those concerns?
I think that's a criticism that I've seen quite a bit, and I definitely understand it. I have two thoughts about it. The first is, the way that they arranged the rollout of these tickets included the ability to buy tickets with a hotel package and partnering with different hotels around the northeast of Puerto Rico. And I think that's, encouraging people to stay at hotels is trying to get people away from Airbnbs. But of course, the statistics coming out of Puerto Rico is that, there's like a huge number of people coming and staying in Airbnb and vacation homes and things like that. So that certainly is a contradiction. What I think is that the root of that contradiction is, again, this colonial relationship, right, between Puerto Rico and the United States. And I think one artist is not going to eliminate that problem or have the capacity to do so. So, I mean, this is, I think, in some ways for me, a little bit of a like metaphor for the Puerto Rican issue, which is the kinds of constraints that happen as a result of this colonial relationship and how much autonomy does the island really have.
This is obviously not like this album did not start his sort of trajectory of talking implicitly and explicitly about politics and about the kind of social issues facing Puerto Rico. And this is really something that's been happening for a long time. I mean, one example that really stands out to me is a few years ago, he put out this video for his song El Apagón, which means the blackout. And like smack in the middle of this music video is this like nearly 20-minute documentary about gentrification in Puerto Rico.
Puerto Rico sigue sufriendo apagones que dejan a decenas de miles sin luz. Esta explosión dejó a todo Puerto Rico a oscuras en abril. En agosto, uno de los hospitales principales del país estuvo casi 20 horas sin electricidad. Todo esto después de que la distribución...
But could you talk to me like just briefly about a few of the examples of where he's kind of done this throughout his career?
One example I like to point out is his first appearance on television in the United States in 2018 was on The Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon.
He is nominated for 5 Latin American Music Awards and is making his TV debut with us tonight. We're honored, buddy. Performing Estamos Bien. Give it up for Bad Bunny!
And at that time, also, his English was a little bit labored, But he gets on the stage and makes a very short comment in English about Hurricane Maria, which had happened in 2017.
After 1 year of the hurricane,
There's still people without electricity in their homes. More than 3,000 people die and Trump is still in denial. But you know what? Estamos bien.
Saying that, thousands of people died, much of the island is still suffering, and President Donald Trump doesn't care. And then he goes into a song called Estamos Bien, which is a song that lyrically is a lot about kind of resilience, and we're doing well even with or without money and things like that. But to use your platform the very first time on American television to make that statement, also not in your native language, I think kind of set the tone for a lot of his career moving forward. Um, so another thing he did shortly after that in 2019, there were massive protests to oust then Governor Ricardo Rosselló, who came from the pro statehood party and who had implemented all kinds of austerity measures. And sort of the straw that broke the camel's back was a series of private chats that got released. And those chats revealed a lot of misogyny, a lot of homophobia. They even mocked the dead from Hurricane Maria, which, over 4,500 people passed away as a result of the hurricane. These were like some of the biggest protests in Puerto Rican history, take place in July of 2019. And at the time, Bad Bunny was in Europe touring, and he left his European tour to join the protest over multiple days.
Joining the thousands in protest, Puerto Rican superstars Residente, Bad Bunny, and Ricky Martin.
Esta vez hubieron muchas personas que salieron a manifestarse por primera vez, que quizás tenían el miedo, pero ese miedo se acabó. Puerto Rico no se va a dejar. Bienvenido a la generación del Yo no me dejo, los quiero Puerto Rico.
And he also released a song on YouTube with Residente and Ile that was a kind of call to arms for the Puerto Rican people to come to the streets. So it's another like very tangible example of him using his platform and also participating in this political process. And then another area where he has made a lot of kind of statements is around questions of LGBT and equality, gender-based violence, and things of that nature. So again, he was back on Jimmy Fallon in 2020, and he famously wore a black skirt and he wore a T-shirt that said "Mataron a Alexa, no a un hombre con falda," which means they killed Alexa, not a man with a skirt. And this was a reference to the brutal murder of a trans woman named Alexa in Puerto Rico. Officials and also media outlets often misgendered Alexa. And so this T-shirt that he wore on Jimmy Fallon really spoke back at those Puerto Rican authorities and at the Puerto Rican media who were misgendering her. He's always kind of spoken up about a lot of these issues. And I think in a way that's very natural. There are also issues that I think are important to people of his generation, Puerto Ricans in their 20s and 30s who have grown up in these kind of debt crisis times and witnessed Maria and, their schools closing and their universities getting destroyed and having them, like, he is part of that generation. And so I think also a lot of the things he speaks about resonate with a lot of people.
Yeah, I've heard it described as the crisis generation in Puerto Rico. Yesterday, I also spoke to Arturo Mazoldella, who runs this project in the community of Adjuntas called Casa Pueblo. And they have these very extensive solar microgrids that are kind of like aiming to, it's a project about self-sufficiency in a lot of ways, but they have a big part of this is these solar microgrids that are, aiming to help Puerto Ricans get to a place where they don't have to be plagued by blackouts all the time and where they, ideally where they don't have to leave. So I wanted to just play for you a part of what he said to me.
We have the main facility, a radio station, a solar cinema. We are managing 2 forest lands. Yeah, we have our own brand of coffee, Café Madre Isla, to break the model of dependency. So we don't rely on government funding. Think about Puerto Rico being a U.S. colony, and self-determination have been denied to the people of Puerto Rico because the narrative is that Puerto Rico lack natural resources. We don't have gas, we don't have coal, we don't have petroleum, so we have to depend upon the U.S. or someone else. And what we're saying is that Puerto Rico should build energy independence regardless of the political destiny of the island. We have done over 400 projects already. All of a sudden, you are exercising self-determination at the community level. And as you decolonize your reality, this is a beautiful island. This is a beautiful country that we, as Bad Bunny and many, keep resistant. La resistencia cultural. We're here and we don't want to go away.
I just wanted to get your reaction to that. And, to what extent do you see a kind of common thread between what Arturo is talking about there and what Bad Bunny is trying to do, at least symbolically with this residency?
Yeah. I mean, I think they're very interconnected, as he said at the end of that clip. I mean, I think for me, that one of the things that makes this particular album so moving is that there is a kind of, on the one hand, longing and sadness about missing the island and fear about what could happen if things keep going the way they're going. But I think there's also messages of hope in this record, that there are things people can do, that people are, holding on to their culture, to their land, and doing these kinds of projects that could offer self-determination and protect Puerto Rican culture, Puerto Rican people, Puerto Rican land. And so I think they're completely interrelated. But I think that we need to think about this album as like an invitation for people who may not know anything about this situation or this place, but are really into Bad Bunny, that they can come and see what life is like there. And again, think critically about why things are the way they are, and shed light on projects like Arturo's, right, which are very well known amongst Puerto Ricans and the Puerto Rican diaspora, but perhaps less well known in other parts of the world. And so I think it really gives a platform, a global platform, to really shed light on these issues that I think is really critical.
All right, Petra, we'll leave it there. Thank you so much for this conversation.
Yes, thank you.
All right, that's all for today. Front Burner was produced this week by Matthew Amha, Joyita Shingupta, Mackenzie Cameron, Matt Muse, Lauren Donnelly, and Courtney Dorrington. Our YouTube producer is John Lee. Music by Joseph Shavison. Our executive producer this week is Elaine Chow. The show was hosted this week by Elaine and by me, Allie James. Thanks for listening to Front Burner, and we'll talk to you Monday.